Imagine you spend 4 years. 4 years of 14-hour days, skipped vacations, missed birthdays, ramen for dinner 3 nights a week, building something from nothing. A real company, something that works, something people actually want. And then, on the single best day of your professional life, the day you finally get a meeting with serious investors, you show up and discover your best friend got there first. He's already in the room, already shaking hands, already pitching. And he's pitching your idea, your slides, your language, your market research, word for word. I want you to sit with that image for a second, because that is exactly where this story begins. And I promise you, by the time it ends, you're gonna feel something you don't feel very often when you watch a video on the internet. You're gonna feel justice. Part 1, the beginning of everything. The garage, the dream, and the brother I never had. Our narrator, who posted this story on Reddit under the username u/builtitfromdust, goes by Marcus in real life. He grew up in a mid-sized city in Ohio, the kind of place where if you wanted something bigger than what was around you, you had to manufacture it yourself. His dad worked at a manufacturing plant for 30 years. His mom was a school administrator. Neither of them had ever started a business, but Marcus had been obsessed with entrepreneurship since he was 15 years old and read a biography of Howard Schultz, the guy who built Starbucks in a single weekend. By the time Marcus was 22, he was working a day job at a mid-level marketing firm, grinding out client decks for 8 hours, and then going home to spend another 4 hours on his real project, a software platform he was building to help independent restaurant owners manage their supply chains. If you've never thought about how hard it is for a small restaurant to keep track of inventory, vendor relationships, and food costs simultaneously, trust me, it's a nightmare. And nobody had built an affordable, elegant solution specifically for small and mid-sized restaurants. Marcus saw the gap. He had the vision. What he needed was a technical co-founder. That's where Daniel came in. Marcus and Daniel had been friends since sophomore year of college. They'd lived in the same dorm, stayed up until 3 a.m. debating business ideas and arguing about movies, went on road trips, been each other's wingman, stood in each other's corners through breakups and job rejections and family stuff. Marcus describes Daniel as, quote, the kind of person who made every room feel a little more alive, the kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and asked about your mom by name. Daniel was brilliant with code, genuinely gifted. He could look at a problem and in 45 minutes have a working prototype that would take most developers 2 weeks. Marcus knew this, and so in the spring of their 24th year, Marcus sat Daniel down at a bar in Columbus, ordered 2 beers, slid a napkin across the table with a drawn diagram on it, and said, I think this could be a real company. I think we could build this, and I want to do it with you. Daniel looked at the napkin, looked at Marcus, and said, yes. They shook hands. Then they hugged, and just like that, SupplySimple was born. Part 2, the build. 2 years of blood, sweat, and total belief. The next 2 years were, by Marcus's own account, the best and hardest of his life. They worked out of Marcus's 1-bedroom apartment for the first 6 months. Daniel coded, Marcus handled everything else. Product vision, customer discovery, brand identity, pitch materials, cold emails, social media, legal filings. They didn't pay themselves for the first 8 months. Marcus maxed out 1 credit card and borrowed $7,000 from his parents. Daniel's girlfriend at the time, a woman named Priya, kept asking Daniel when the hobby project was going to become a real job. But things started moving. They landed their first 3 paying restaurant clients by pure hustle. Marcus would literally walk into restaurants during off hours, ask to speak to the owner, and demo the product on his laptop. It was raw, it was real, and it worked. Those 3 clients became 10. 10 became 30. By the end of year 2, SupplySimple had 41 paying clients, a real product, and enough traction to start a serious fundraising conversation. Marcus had been working on the investor pitch for months. He'd studied Y Combinator demo days. He'd read every piece of Paul Graham writing on the internet. He built the deck slide by slide, word by word. He knew the market size numbers by heart. He could answer objections in his sleep. And then there was Maya. Marcus met Maya about 14 months into building SupplySimple. She was working at a local PR firm, smart and confident, and the kind of person who said exactly what she thought without making you feel bad about hearing it. Marcus was immediately completely gone. They started dating 3 weeks after they met. Within 6 months, she had moved into his apartment. Yes, the same one where he and Daniel held their morning stand-up calls. She understood the dream. She believed in it. She'd sit across from Marcus at the kitchen table at 11 at night while he refined the pitch deck, and she'd read through slides and give him notes like a professional. Life, for the first time in a long time, felt genuinely full. Marcus and Daniel agreed that they were ready to raise a proper seed round. Marcus put together a target list of 12 venture investors in the Midwest and 2 in New York. He spent weeks getting warm introductions through LinkedIn, mutual connections, and former colleagues. It was grueling, methodical work. Eventually, after weeks of back-channel conversations, one firm rose to the top: Horizon Ventures, a respected early-stage fund based in Chicago with a portfolio full of B2B SaaS companies exactly like theirs. Marcus got a meeting. The date was a Tuesday in March. He told Daniel that night. They video called, and Daniel seemed genuinely excited, pumping his fist, calling it the moment. Marcus went to sleep that night feeling something he could only describe as clean, like everything was aligned, like the universe had been watching the work and finally decided it was time. He had no idea that the universe was about to hand him the greatest gut punch of his life.
Part 3. The Betrayal. The Room I Wasn't Supposed to See. The morning of the Horizon Ventures meeting, Marcus got up at 5:45 a.m. He showered. He put on the blazer he'd bought specifically for the occasion. He printed backup copies of the deck. He left 45 minutes early because he didn't want to be rushed. He planned to grab a coffee near the Horizon Ventures office, collect himself, go over his notes one last time, and walk in sharp. He got to the coffee shop a block from the office at 9:15 a.m. for his 10 a.m. meeting. He ordered a black coffee, found a corner seat, and opened his laptop to do one final pass through the slides. That's when his phone buzzed. It was a LinkedIn notification. Someone had tagged Horizon Ventures in a post. Marcus doesn't know why he clicked it. Call it instinct, call it the universe nudging him. He clicked it, and the first thing he saw was a photo. It was a photo inside the Horizon Ventures conference room. There were 4 people in it, 2 partners from the firm that Marcus recognized from the firm's website, and 2 other people sitting across from them. One of those 2 people was Daniel. The other was Priya, Daniel's girlfriend. They were smiling. The caption under the photo posted by one of the Horizon partners read, "Great meeting with the team behind SupplySimple this morning. Excited to see where this goes." Marcus read it 3 times. His coffee sat untouched. He felt his body go completely still in the way it does when your brain is processing something that doesn't fit any existing category in your mind. Daniel had gone to Horizon Ventures without him, before him, with Priya, and had pitched SupplySimple, Marcus's company, their company, as if Marcus didn't exist. He stared at the screen for 90 seconds. Then he stood up, walked to the trash can, and threw away the backup printed decks he'd carried in like a security blanket. He sat back down. He called Daniel. No answer. He called again. No answer. He sent a text. "I see the LinkedIn post. Call me now." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, and then Daniel's reply came through. "I was going to explain everything. I think this is better. I'll talk to you tonight." Marcus sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours. He didn't go to the meeting. He didn't call Horizon Ventures to explain. He just sat there, in his blazer, with his empty coffee cup, trying to understand how the person he trusted most in the world had just walked into a room and erased him.
Part 4. The Full Picture. It was worse than he thought. That night, Daniel came over. Marcus describes the conversation as one of the most surreal experiences of his life. Sitting across from someone he'd known for years, someone who had been a groomsman at his cousin's wedding, someone who had held Marcus's hand when his dad had a health scare 2 years ago, and watching that person explain calmly and almost clinically why they had just done what they did. Daniel's argument, roughly, was this. He believed Priya had business skills that complemented his technical ones better than Marcus did. He felt that Marcus's vision for the company was too conservative. He'd spoken with a startup lawyer who'd reviewed their original handshake agreement and informal communications and believed, and Daniel used this word deliberately, believed that because Marcus had never formalized his equity stake, had never signed a co-founder agreement, and because the primary LLC had been registered in Daniel's name for tax simplicity early on, Daniel had legal standing to move forward without him. In other words, Daniel had structured the betrayal. It wasn't a moment of weakness or impulse, it was a plan. Marcus also discovered that same night something he hadn't known. Daniel and Maya knew each other, not just casually. They had mutual friends. In the weeks leading up to the Horizon meeting, Daniel had reached out to Maya, allegedly to talk about the company's PR strategy. Marcus would later find out, through a mutual friend, that those conversations had been going on nearly 2 months, and that they hadn't always been about PR. Maya denied everything at first. Then she admitted the conversations. Then she admitted that she had, quote, developed feelings during a period when she and Marcus had been going through a rough patch that Marcus hadn't even fully realized was a rough patch. In the span of 72 hours, Marcus lost his company, his co-founder, and his girlfriend, all to each other. He was 26 years old. He had no formal equity in the company he'd conceived and built. He had nothing on paper. He had maxed credit cards and a borrowed $7,000, and 4 years of his life poured into something that had just been taken from him by the 2 people closest to him. If this story ended here, it would be a tragedy. But this is a venture and karma story, and karma, as it turns out, is extraordinarily patient. Before we keep going, and trust me, this story is nowhere near over. If you're finding yourself completely pulled into this, you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Every week on Venture and Karma, we bring you real stories from real people about the risks they took, the betrayals they survived, and the moments where the universe finally balanced the books. If that sounds like your kind of content, tap subscribe right now and hit the bell so you never miss one. It takes 2 seconds, and it means we can keep making these for you. Okay, back to Marcus.
Part 5. The Rebuild. The darkest season and the plan that started in a notebook. Marcus spent what he describes as a genuinely dark winter after the betrayal. He moved back in with his parents in Ohio for 3 months. He didn't tell many people what had happened, partly out of shame, partly because he was still processing it, and partly because he was, even then, already thinking strategically about his next move. He was, at his core, still a builder. He got a job at a SaaS consulting firm in Columbus, a step down from what he'd been doing, but it came with one critical advantage. He had access to senior executives in the restaurant and food service industry as clients. Every day, he was in conversations with the kinds of people who were his target customers. He was learning the industry from the inside, getting paid, and rebuilding his financial footing. But he wasn't idle at night. He started a new notebook. On the first page, he wrote 2 things. Build something better. Do it right this time. Doing it right meant everything that SupplySimple had done informally would now be done with precision. Legal agreements, formal equity splits, IP assignments,
clear co-founder contracts. He took an online course in startup law. He spent evenings talking with a lawyer friend who walked him through every document a properly structured company should have from day one. He also spent time, a lot of time, thinking about what SupplySimple had gotten right and what it had missed. He identified one core gap. The platform handled supply logistics, but it didn't handle the financial relationship between restaurants and their vendors. Payment terms, invoice disputes, credit. That was the piece nobody had solved. That was the next version. He called the concept ClearPlate. And this time, he wasn't going to find a co-founder at a bar on a napkin. He posted in 3 different startup founders communities online, wrote a detailed brief about what he was building and what kind of technical partner he was looking for. And over a period of 6 weeks, had 15 conversations with potential co-founders. He ran background checks, actual background checks. He had a startup attorney draft a co-founder agreement template before he'd even picked someone. Eventually, he chose a woman named Soo Yeon, a Korean-American engineer he'd connected with through a Founders Slack community. She had spent 4 years at a fintech company, knew the payment space cold, and, crucially, had been through a bad startup experience herself and cared deeply about doing things properly. They had lawyers review and sign their co-founder agreement before writing a single line of code for ClearPlate. Marcus had learned his lesson, every lesson. For the next 18 months, he and Soo Yeon built quietly. No social media, no LinkedIn posts, no public announcements. They had 12 paying pilot customers within 8 months, and Marcus had learned from his SupplySimple experience to keep operations lean and cash flow positive from early on. They weren't burning through runway, they were building a real business. Meanwhile, across town, metaphorically speaking, things were happening with SupplySimple. Part 6. What was happening on the other side? The cracks in the palace. Marcus made a deliberate decision early on not to track Daniel's progress obsessively. He checked in occasionally, the way you might glance at a storm radar when you know there's weather coming, but he refused to let it consume him. Still, information had a way of finding him. Through mutual industry contact, he learned that Horizon Ventures had indeed made a seed investment in SupplySimple. The amount was never publicly disclosed, but people in the Columbus startup scene pegged it at around $800,000. Daniel and Priya had hired a small team, moved into a real office, and by all external appearances, they were doing fine. But Marcus heard other things too. He heard that the product had stalled, that Daniel, without Marcus handling product vision and customer-facing strategy, had drifted into building features that customers hadn't asked for and ignored the ones they actually needed. Several of the original 41 clients that Marcus had personally signed, people who had taken meetings because of Marcus's pitch, people who trusted Marcus, had grown frustrated and churned off the platform. He heard that Priya, who had taken the role of CEO, had struggled to build trust with the remaining team. There were reports of high turnover. A developer who'd been there from the early days resigned publicly on LinkedIn, writing vaguely but unmistakably about a toxic leadership culture. He heard that Horizon Ventures was not happy. And he heard something else, something that made Marcus feel a complicated mix of vindication and sadness in equal measure. He heard that Daniel and Maya's relationship, which had begun in the wreckage of Marcus's trust, were not going well. The same qualities that made their situationship exciting, the secrecy, the transgression, the drama, had apparently not translated into a stable partnership once they were just 2 people trying to build a life together. According to a mutual friend, they had broken up and reconciled twice in under a year. Marcus did not celebrate any of this. He noted it and moved on. He had work to do. Now, here's where the story shifts. Here's where I need you to really pay attention, because what happens next is not the kind of thing you could script if you tried. And I want you to remember one thing before I tell you. Marcus didn't plan this. He didn't engineer it. He didn't manipulate anything. He just built something great, stayed in his lane, and let the work speak. What happened next was the universe doing what the universe does when someone's been patient long enough.
Part 7. The Conference. The room he walked back into. 18 months after Marcus and Soo-Yun started building Clearplate, they were invited, through a mutual connection, to present at a regional food and beverage technology conference in Chicago. Not the biggest stage in the world, but a real one. About 400 attendees, including operators, investors, and vendors from across the industry. Marcus almost said no. He was heads down and the timing was tight. Soo-Yun convinced him. "We have 43 paying clients and a product that works. It's time to stop hiding." He agreed. They built a presentation, not a pitch deck, a demonstration. Real clients, real numbers, real testimonials from restaurant owners talking on camera about how Clearplate had changed the way they managed vendor payments. Marcus had become an excellent presenter over the years. Steady, warm, specific, the kind of speaker who doesn't sound like he's selling you something even when he very much is. The day before the conference, Marcus checked the full attendee list as a matter of routine. Halfway down the list, he saw a name he recognized. Daniel Marsh, SupplySimple. He also saw 2 lines below it, Horizon Ventures, partner, attending. Marcus sat with this for about 15 minutes. Then he texted Soo-Yun a single line. "We're going to need to be really, really good tomorrow." She replied, "We already are." He didn't sleep much that night, not out of anxiety, out of focus. By 2 in the morning, he had mentally rehearsed the presentation 17 times and was completely, uncomfortably calm. The conference opened with a networking session. Marcus arrived early and positioned himself deliberately, not to avoid Daniel and not to seek him out, but simply to be visible. He wanted to be in the room, easy to find, comfortable in his own skin. He wore the same blazer he'd bought for the Horizon Ventures meeting 4 years earlier. He'd kept it all this time. He'd never worn it again until now. That felt right. It took 40 minutes before Daniel found him. Marcus saw him coming from across the room. Same confident walk, same practiced smile. For a moment, looking at Daniel, Marcus felt something unexpected. Not anger, not even satisfaction, just a kind of anthropological curiosity. Who is this person now? How does he carry what he did? He extended his hand. Marcus shook it. They made small talk for about 3 minutes in the practiced, careful way of 2 people who know each other's secrets. Daniel mentioned that SupplySimple was going through a transition period. Marcus said that sounded challenging. Daniel asked what Marcus was working on these days. Marcus said he'd been building something in the restaurant payment space and let it go at that. They parted, and then Marcus went and gave his presentation. He was, by every account, remarkable. Attendees who were there later described it as one of the best presentations of the day. Grounded, data-rich, human, and compelling. The Q&A ran 15 minutes over time because people kept asking questions. 2 restaurant group owners approached him immediately after and asked for his card. And then, one of the Horizon Ventures partners approached him. Not to talk about Daniel, not to awkwardly acknowledge what had happened 4 years ago, to talk about Clearplate. She had apparently been watching Clearplate's growth quietly for several months. She'd seen the company mentioned in a food tech newsletter and had wanted to understand it better. She asked Marcus if he was raising. He said they were beginning to think about it. She asked if she could set up a proper conversation. He said he'd like that. They met 3 weeks later in Chicago. They liked what they heard, and 2 months after that, Horizon Ventures led a $1.4 million seed round into Clearplate, nearly double what they'd invested in SupplySimple years earlier. The same firm, a different founder, the same industry, and Marcus, this time, was in the room. Part 8. The Collapse. What happened to SupplySimple? 6 months after Clearplate closed its seed round, SupplySimple ceased operations. The announcement came via a brief LinkedIn post from Daniel. It cited market conditions and strategic pivots that didn't land as expected. It thanked the team and the investors. It was the kind of post that says a lot without saying anything. Reading between the lines, and Marcus, who saw it in his feed, did not have to read very hard. The company had burned through its investment, failed to grow its client base past the initial cohort, and been unable to raise a follow-on round. Horizon Ventures, having seen their investment go to zero, had declined to reinvest. And Daniel, without his co-founder, without his product visionary, without the person who actually understood the customer and the market, had built a technically capable but commercially directionless product that ran out of runway. Priya had left the company and Daniel about 8 months before the shutdown. Marcus heard about this through the same mutual friend network. She'd relocated to Austin and was working at an established tech company. Whatever had begun in the shadow of Marcus's trust had apparently not survived contact with actual sustained life. Daniel, from what Marcus knows, eventually found a senior engineering role at a mid-sized software company. Not a bad life, not the outcome he chased when he'd walked into Horizon Ventures without Marcus, but not SupplySimple, not the dream. Marcus doesn't spend energy thinking about Daniel's current situation. He says the emotion he most consistently feels about the whole chapter is something he can only describe as expensive relief. Relief that it ended at the cost of years and pain and a level of betrayal that reshaped him fundamentally as a human being. But he says this: it made him better. Not in the way people say that about difficult experiences when they're trying to find a silver lining, in a genuinely specific, measurable way. Because of what Daniel did, Marcus became someone who documents everything, trusts slowly, builds deliberately, and appreciates deeply. Because of what Maya did, he eventually met the person he'd marry, a woman named Claire, who he says is incapable of subtlety, and once told him in their first week of dating that she thought he was remarkable to his face without any apparent embarrassment whatsoever. He found that completely disarming. He fell in love with her in about 48 hours. Because of what happened to SupplySimple, Clearplate was built correctly from the first day. And because of that, when growth came, the foundation held.
Part 9. Where it stands now. 3 years after the seed round. Marcus posted his story on Reddit/ProRevenge and /TrueOffMyChest roughly 3 years after the Horizon seed round closed for Clearplate. At the time of posting, the numbers were as follows. Clearplate had 380 paying restaurant and food service clients across 19 states. Annual recurring revenue had crossed the $2.3 million mark. They had raised a Series A of $6.8 million from a different venture fund, and Horizon Ventures, their original seed investor, had participated in the round as well, doubling down on the company they believed in. The team had grown to 22 people, including a head of sales Marcus recruited from one of the major restaurant tech incumbents. Marcus and Suyan split the CEO responsibilities, Marcus externally, Suyan internally, and by all accounts, it worked exactly as it should. Marcus also mentioned something else in his post that I think is worth sharing in full, because it's the kind of thing that sounds simple but takes a long time to actually mean. He wrote, and I'll paraphrase here, that the worst thing that ever happened to him professionally taught him that the most dangerous kind of trust is the kind you give to someone before you understand who they actually are when things get difficult. He said that Daniel, in a strange and painful way, had been the most expensive and most valuable teacher of his life. Not because what Daniel did was okay, it wasn't, and Marcus said so plainly, but because the experience revealed every weakness in his own approach, his informality, his assumption of good faith without verification, his tendency to build relationships on feeling rather than evidence.
He said the version of himself who walked into that coffee shop near Horizon Ventures in his blazer and saw that LinkedIn photo was not capable of building Clearplate. He needed to go through what he went through to become the person who could. He ended the post with a line that got over 14,000 upvotes. It said, "I didn't get revenge, I got better," and somehow that ended up being the same thing. The comments section was apparently unhinged in the best possible way. Part 10. What this story is actually about. The lesson beneath the lesson. Here's the thing about betrayal that nobody tells you when it's happening, because when it's happening, you are in no condition to hear it. Betrayal, at its core, is a clarification. When Daniel walked into Horizon Ventures without Marcus, he was, in the cruelest possible way, doing Marcus the favor of showing him who he actually was. He was removing himself from Marcus's future. He was eliminating from Marcus's path a co-founder who was fundamentally not aligned with him, not trustworthy, and not capable of building something great alongside someone else. Had SupplySimple continued with both of them, would it have succeeded? Maybe, but it would have been built on a foundation with a massive crack running through the middle of it. The same is true for Maya. The person who leaves you for your best friend while you're building your dream wasn't the person who was going to be there when the dream got hard, and it always gets hard. The version of Marcus who lost Maya was the version of Marcus who met Claire, who apparently once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring Marcus soup when he was sick because she wasn't going to just text about it. That's the kind of detail that doesn't sound like much until you've been with someone who wouldn't. And here's the second thing nobody tells you. The people who betray you are almost always betrayed by their own actions. Not dramatically, not immediately, not in ways that make great movie moments, but quietly and completely and inevitably. Daniel built his palace on someone else's foundation, and foundations that aren't yours don't hold. Marcus didn't have to do anything to Daniel. He didn't have to plot or scheme or sabotage. He just had to be Marcus and keep being Marcus and let Daniel be Daniel. The universe did the rest. I want to take one more second here, because if this story hit you the way it hits most people who hear it, that slow build of anger, then disbelief, then that deeply satisfying exhale at the end, then you already know what kind of channel this is. Venture and karma exists for exactly this, for the builders who got knocked down, for the people who kept going when they had every reason to stop, for everyone who believes that the work matters and that the ledger gets balanced eventually. We post every week, and every week there's a story like this one, real, complicated, and real. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Join the community. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story like Marcus's today, share this with them. It might be exactly what they need. Marcus is, right now, somewhere in Ohio, probably in a meeting, probably building something, probably with Suyan running circles around a problem that would take most teams twice as long to solve. He's married to Claire. They have a dog named Horizon, which, if you think about it, might be the most perfectly calibrated act of reclamation in the entire story. He named his dog after the firm that once had been in a room he wasn't in, and that firm is now one of his investors. That's the full circle. That's what the universe does when you keep going. Not immediately, not painlessly, not on your timeline, but eventually, if you do the work and you do it right, and you refuse to let the worst thing that happened to you become the last thing, eventually the circle closes. SupplySimple is gone. Clearplate is real. And Marcus, who once sat in a coffee shop in a blazer with untouched coffee and a broken heart, is exactly where he was always supposed to be. He just had to survive the part where Daniel was in the room first. And he did.
Thanks for spending this time with Venture and Karma. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment below and tell me the part that hit you hardest. Was it the conference scene? The Horizon twist? The dog named Horizon? Tell me, and I'll see you in the next one. This was Marcus's story.
Posted to Reddit by you/builtitfromdust. Real name changed. Details adjusted. Karma? Completely and entirely real.